Yes. There you go.
Oh,
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, so as advertised, the topic is the subservient body. Oh, let me share the screen so you can see this. Share screen. There you go. Share. And move you guys out of the way.
We just sidelined us.
yeah.
Ooh, wow, that's exciting.
Well, we can see Ralph now too.
All right.
Found the thing to click on.
Yay.
Yay!
Welcome aboard.
It's thinking itself through here.
Yeah.
All right. So do you guys see that subservient body?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, well, so I've been collecting these passages for a while now because I feel like in the culture of the world today, we get a lot of comments about, I feel this, I feel that, I think that, and it's a lot of times it's justifying the cravings of the body or the feelings of the body. And the writings, they just don't support that's how we should be looking at things, that we don't think from the body forward, we think from the spirit down is how it goes, not the body up. And what?
Should.
Yeah, we should, exactly. We should think that way, correct. And so I've pulled this together. I don't know how many people who aren't religious or spiritual would actually find this useful and change their ways, but I feel like if nothing else, it gives those of us who are followers of the writings some kind of ammunition to kind of say, well, there is another way of looking at these things that I think makes some sense. So anyway, that's the point of this as far as I'm concerned. And feel free to chime in with comments, questions, whatever is usual along the way. I am recording it. And I do intend to throw this up on the church YouTube afterwards. So don't say something that you don't want 5 other people looking at, Well, the YouTube uploads usually get around 20. So you might have 15 people, but still, anyway, you get the idea. Why is this doing this? I'll close that. Okay, so we start with this basic one from our Arcana. You see it's 447, so this is really early in the Arcana. This is talking probably about Adam and Eve or Cain and Abel, something like that. It's written, someone who had recently become a spirit spoke to me, and when he heard that I was talking about the spirit, he said, "What is a spirit?" For he thought that he was still a man. I told him that a spirit exists within each person, and that the spirit is the life within him, and with the body something subservient which enables him to live on earth. So you get the idea. Subservient is what the body is supposed to be to the spirit. I forget, it was a few months ago when I did a newsletter about Earth and the universe, and I mentioned how this guy Robert Monroe would have out-of-body experiences and saw all these different life forms that were in different frequency as us. One of the things that Monroe talks about that I think really jives with what Swedenborg's writing here is Monroe says that the big change will happen in this world when we all realize that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that it's not all about the body. And this is what Swedenborg is saying, the same thing, is that, hey, look, you got to realize that the spirit's your life, the body, it's just a meat sack that you happen to inhabit for a while. So I think it's a really big thing that if you can grab a hold of this as your starting point, It's AC 447. So even Swedenborg and the Lord tell, I think he's trying to say, hey, this is important. This is important to see this, to grab a hold of this. And if you can see it in that way, then maybe it'll help you make the next steps. So there you go. There's that one. I'm going to change my view here so I can see. There we go. All right. So next slide. Next slide. It says the same passage continued. In themselves, flesh and bones, or the body, I said, have no life or thought. Seeing him bewildered by this, I asked whether he had ever heard about the soul. He replied, what is a soul? I do not know what a soul is. At this point, I was allowed to tell him that he himself was now a soul or spirit, and that he could be aware of this from the fact that he was up above my head and not standing on the earth. He was unable to perceive this. Was he unable to perceive this? At this point, he, I think, supposed to be fled in terror, shouting out, I am a spirit, I am a spirit. Oh no, oh no. I think that was the end of that one. Yeah. So there are plenty of places where Swedenborg makes the point that people die and they're unaware that they've died. Here we go. Owen's joining us. So
Oh, and
The late Alan Holden.
yeah. So yeah, it's important to realize that we have this life beyond, and to make that distinction that if you go, okay, well, if it's my body that is craving chocolate, or it's my body that's craving the sex or the whatever it is, it's like, oh wait, this is just my body's got a problem. It's not me, right? I am a spiritual being. That's not who I am. This is my body, and having that ability to make that separation, I think, is really important. So there we go. Body and service to the soul. Does anybody want to read one?
Well, I could read that.
Go for it.
Every servant and every free man signifies the natural man and the spiritual man. The spiritual man is meant by free man, and the natural man by servant, because the spiritual man is led by the Lord from heaven, and to be led by the Lord is freedom, while the natural man obeys and serves the spiritual, for it executes what the spiritual man wills and thinks.
Who wants to do the next part?
I'll do it.
All right.
Servant is mentioned in many passages in the word, and one who does not know that in these servant means what does service and affects the things the spiritual man wills and thinks might suppose that servant there means one who is in servitude. Thus he might understand it in its ordinary sense, but it will be plain from the passages in the word that will presently be cited that it means what does service and affects. When servant is mentioned in the word in this sense, the natural man is meant by it, which is a servant, in the same sense as the body is a servant to the soul, to its soul.
Right. Yeah, I think we got another one. John Talbot showing up here. Let's see if I can move this. All right. So, yeah, I think it's a big deal that, once again, he says in the same sense, the body is a servant to the soul. And I feel like sometimes we think of servant as, a derogatory term. Oh, so-and-so is the servant, but, he's not trying to make it in that way. It's not trying to be derogatory. It's just, servant means what does service and affects the things. So, the body does have its role, but its role is that of doing what the spirit says. All right. Well, your spirit says, I'm going to go help so-and-so out, or my spirit says, I'm going to chase money. I'm going to try to get the promotions and all that kind of stuff. The body does these things. So yeah, the body has its role, but it's about keeping it subservient. And, in the second sentence there, it says the spiritual man is meant by the free man. The spiritual one is what gets to make the choices. It's the one who's deciding, not the body. And I don't know that how many people actually get to experience that. How many people just think that it's their body that rules over their life. I've got to have this. I got to have that. I need to do that. No, it's supposed to be the body is subservient. Next one. Want to read one, Jennifer?
Sure. Regeneration. Regeneration consists in nothing else than the natural being made subservient and the spiritual becoming its Lord. And the natural is made subservient when it is made to correspond to the spiritual.
Right. I mean, isn't this the whole thing, right? It's making your body do what your spirit says and making your inner life and your external life match up, being in integrity with yourself. And it's not always easy, right? We sometimes choose that we're going to do what the body wants. We're going to chase those things. We're going to, but that's the goal of this whole process, is to get the two on the same page, because they're not always on the same page. This one's from TCR. There's a few slides on this passage. As you see, the heading I put in there is "We're not just animals." And I think this is, again, super important in the context of this conversation of the world, because so many times science just wants to make us out as animals that talk, or animals that have tools and opposable thumbs, things like that. We're just like animals. It's like, well, no, we're not. There's a degree above that we inhabit because of our intellectual abilities, that we're not just like animals. And it's hard to find many news stories that talk about issues that don't take us to that level of, oh no, we're just animals. So anyway, I think it's a piece of the puzzle. Anybody want to read this one? All right, I'll do it. I don't mind. The ancients knew how to lift their minds above sense impressions and take their minds away from them. If sense impressions have the lowest priority, they help open a pathway for the intellect. We then extrapolate truths by a method of extraction. On the other hand, if sense impressions have the highest priority, that pathway is closed and truths are not visible to us, except as if they were in a fog or in the dark of night. Really important thing here, right? The sense impressions have to have the lowest priority, and the ancients knew how to do that. If you don't, your pathways are closed. For wise people, sense impressions have the lowest priority and are subservient to things that are deep inside. For unwise people, sense impressions have the highest priority and are in control. This type of person can truly be called sense-oriented. And that, my friends, is where we find a lot of us today. There are sense impressions that we have in common with animals and sense impressions that we do not have in common with animals. The more we lift our thinking above sense impressions, the more human we are. Without acknowledging God and living by his commandments, however, none of us can lift our thinking above sense impressions and see the truths that relate to the church. It is God who lifts and enlightens us. So, I don't know what you guys take away from all that, but to me, it's that we're not animals, and if we live just by our five senses, we're closing off the pathway, and it's very frustrating in one sense, because if you try to tell somebody hey, you're not seeing this right. You got to understand this better. And they don't understand. Well, maybe that's because they're sense oriented. They're giving their physical senses the highest priority and their intellects are closed. And so therefore, what can you expect out of them? It's just, there's a passage somewhere, I think it's in Earths in the Universe, when Swedenborg's talking about all the different worlds that exist. And he says that we on this planet as a whole correspond to the skin of the grand man. Like we are just the external of the external of the external. We're the hair and skin kind of people. So sometimes I think, well, what do you expect of us? We're just skin people. That's why we chase shiny things. That's what we like. And there's some of that kind of, I think, leaks through here. It's like, well, yeah, you're oriented around the senses. It's the whole Adam and Eve story, right? That's what's going on here. It's just, hey, have you realized that the serpent isn't your friend? He's not as smart as he thinks he is. So. Owen tried to join in, but I guess he didn't make it.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, we can.
Good.
I don't know whether my picture is showing, but I
No.
can hear you.
No, it's not showing.
No.
Click on the little video box down.
Yeah, there's a
on the
video
corner.
box, but it's got a line through it.
Yeah, click on.
Yeah, click on it.
It means it's not showing.
That's right.
There you
Yeah,
Oh, no, that's done.
Start video, but it says a line through it. I don't think it works with a line through it.
Normally you just click on it and it turns it on.
Yeah,
It's all right.
yeah.
We don't.
We
Anyway,
can,
I
we can
know
hear
what you look
you.
like.
well, I can actually see you as well. I
I
can
hope you can
see.
see us.
Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you and you can hear me.
That'll work.
Oh, you're probably in your pajamas.
No, I'm not.
Hmm. It's an inside.
All right. So on to the next. So next one about Arcana, or from the Arcana, and about conforming to heaven. The idea, once again, that we're supposed to be conforming our external life to our internal life. This being so, the external man must be made wholly subservient and subject to the internal. And when the external man is subject to the internal, heaven acts on the external man by means of the internal man and makes the external man conform to things such as are of heaven. The opposite occurs when the external man is not the servant, but the master. The external man is the master when a person has the pleasure of the body and the senses as his end in view, especially when the objects of his selfish and worldly love and not the things of heaven are his end. To have as his end in view being to love one and not the other. So you're getting a pattern, I think, here with these passages. The external is supposed to be subservient to the internal, and so there's variations on the theme, but one of the things I think that makes this point so powerful is the repetition. As an organization, we have a policy that we don't ordain women. And frankly, I think it's based on a whole lot less than this. We have a lot more ammunition on the external should be subservient to the internal. It's a much clearer set of teachings, and which should mean that we should have a much greater weight in our lives. For when a person has those objects as his end, he no longer believes that there's any such thing as an internal man, or that within himself there is anything that we living when his body dies. In his case, the internal, since it does not hold the position of the master, is merely the servant of the external, employed to enable thought and reasoning against what is good and true to take place. For in this person's case, no other kind of influx by way of the internal is available. So, yeah, it's a pretty clear warning, right? You know, if you stuff this up, you're not. It's hard to recover, right? It's hard to recover because once you close that off, how do you open it back up? It's hard to do. But distress can be a signal here. When bodily and worldly interests start to abound and seek to have dominion, he enters into distress and temptation, which persist until he has been brought back into that kind of state where the external man is conformable and subservient to the internal. The external man can never be subservient until it is quiescent and, so to speak, non-existent. Yeah, that's the goal. That's that whole seventh day of creation, right? the battles are done. It's fully created. You can finally get your body to be quiet.
Well, that'll be.
So, I mean, you think about distress and temptation. What do a lot of our distress and temptations revolve around? Well, they revolve around, my I don't have enough money. I don't have enough job security, or promotion, or this, that. A lot of our things are temptations run around. And so what is the point of temptation trying to do? It's trying to tell you to make your body be quiet. Stop chasing shiny things. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Worry about longer term things. So I wonder how, and I tried to pound some of this stuff into Zach's head over the course of the weeks and months and years, and I wonder how much is sinking in. But I think he's actually listening. He understands the message of don't believe your senses. Somehow that one is stuck with him. I think I got to move the goalposts on him a little bit to get this one in here. This one you can see is from Conjugal Love, and going back to the opening statement about culture, and we don't seem to be into restraint when it comes to sexual things. So this is a really important one too. People know that a love for the opposite sex follows the commencement of a youth's own intellect and develops in accordance with its force. Evidence that love ascends as the intellect ascends and descends as the intellect descends. But by its ascending, we mean an ascent into wisdom. And by its descending, we mean a descent into madness. It is wisdom to restrain one's love for the opposite sex and madness to let it go unchecked. And I don't get a whole lot of check-in these days. I don't see a whole lot of restraint.
See people doing that generally.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's, when I turn on the news, the stories are about how somebody has let their love for the sex, opposite or not, go unchecked. It's a good one to hang on to. It's madness to let it go unchecked. It's wisdom to restrain. So, and even the previous sentence there, by its descending, we need to descent into madness. So as your intellect declines, what happens? Oh, you descend into madness. There's feels like a fair bit of that going around these days. It's like people, in the Olympics these days, they keep there's a few of these transgender athletes out there, and I just can't wrap my head around it. I don't understand how you can make a claim that you're a boy when you're a girl. When you don't have the spiritual context, though, I kind of understand. It's like, oh, well, you're thinking from senses, you're thinking from something else, you're not thinking from something higher. You're not restraining yourself. There's none of that. CL has another good one for it, though. It says, in the world, a person is invested with a material body, and this is filled with urges. That we know is true, which in it are like dregs that settle to the bottom when newly fermented wine is being clarified. From such elements come the materials of which the bodies of people in the world are composed. As a result, inward affections that belong to the mind do not appear, and in many cases, scarcely a trace of them is visible. For either the body swallows them up and immerses them in its dregs, or from a habit of dissembling learned from early childhood, it hides them deep within and conceals them from the sight of others. So, once again, not given a whole lot of enthusiasm towards following what the body says, right? You know, it's acknowledging that we have urges, right? You know, we acknowledge that we have these things. We're going to want and feel things, but these things aren't good. They're like the dregs. I don't know, does anybody ever watch the show The Big Bang Theory?
No.
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 You guys are uncultured, but I'll culture you a little bit. Yeah. It's a sitcom, probably came out about 10, 15 years ago now. And, you know, one of the main characters is this nerd. It's like who Zach's going to grow up to be, you know, just this real nerdy computer guy. And he at one point in the series, he gets this girlfriend, and part of the running gag is that there's been no physical intimacy between him and his girlfriend. And after a while, this kind of comes to a head, and you know, they actually call him out on it. Why aren't you guys being physically intimate? You've been together for a long time now. What's going on? And his line was like, why would I want to introduce the dregs of my body into that kind of a relationship, and just a great relationship? And it was just like, wow. I mean, they were making fun of him for feeling that way, but it was a really good point. You know, why would I introduce the dreg? And he used that word dregs. And I just remembered this passage going, wow, that's really good. I don't want to introduce that into a perfectly good relationship. And you know, of course, it's funny to the audience watching it because, well, what guy would say no to that? But he's right. He's right. So maybe one day at a camp I'll show that episode.
I've seen enough to know what you're talking about, but I haven't watched it regularly.
Well, it's one of those shows that they always had a bunch of episodes on airplanes. So back in the before time, long ago, when you would travel by plane, I would watch, you know, 4 episodes on a trip or whatever. And I never sat down and watched the whole series, but I did catch that. Again, more the same. People who are being regenerated are conscious of this change as an inner urge not to allow sensory delights and bodily or earthly pleasures to take control, and draw ideas present in the understanding over to their own side to support them. When this change takes place, the previous state has reached its final phase and the new one is entering its first. This is what is meant by on the third day. So, yeah, it's, again, don't do it. Don't allow sensory delights to take control. And this is from Divine Providence. I find it useful to, you know, again, see from other books, not just Arcana. But the reason why many in the world are not prepared for heaven is that they love the first degree of their life, which is called the natural, and are unwilling to withdraw from it and become spiritual. The natural degree of life, viewed in itself, loves nothing but self and the world. For it clings to what? Ah, yes, the senses of the body. And these reach out towards the world. Well, the spiritual degree of life viewed in itself loves the Lord in heaven and also the self in the world. But God in the heaven is higher, chief and dominant, the self and the world as lower, instrumental, and, oh, there's that word again, subservient. Subservient. Yes, who's in control? And if we're playing the game of excusing people for their non-subservience, it's, well, that they're natural people, right? They're not thinking spiritually, and it's, as long as you're not thinking about spiritually higher things, it's hard to get out of that mindset. So I don't know, a few weeks ago I did a video for YouTube on forbidden food, which was based off a sermon I did a year and a half ago on forbidden food, and it ties into this discussion really well. You see from Leviticus, chapter 11 here, all flying insects that walk on all fours are to be regarded as unclean by you. There are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat, those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground. Of these you may eat any kind of locust, katydid, cricket, or grasshopper, but all other flying insects that have 4 legs you are to regard as unclean. Now, interesting enough, as a little side, I defy you to find other flying insects that have 4 legs. They just don't seem to exist. But regardless, there are plenty of other categories of insects that are forbidden. And so you get this idea where, cockroaches, yeah, don't eat them. Grasshoppers.
No.
So sorry, Lori, no more cockroaches. Gotta give it up. No. So what the idea that or example I put in the video of how we are to understand this is that, well, creeping things like grasshoppers, they're things that are all on the ground. These are correspondence of our natural senses, our physical senses, and you want things. You only eat things, consume things, make something part of your life, things that can raise themselves higher. So the idea here was the cockroach is, okay, the guy who just wants to have physical gratification with a woman, I want to hook up with her and, get my groove on. That's not, there's no spiritual component to that. That's the cockroach. That's the slithering thing. That's the thing that can't hop, versus the 2 lovers who, they engage in physical gratification, but there's something spiritual behind it. And so that's yes, consume that. I mean, it goes so far. I mean, if you ever look into conjugal love in particular, I mean, it doesn't, it says don't have sex before marriage, but if you do, as long as there's looking towards something further, there's a spiritual component even to that, it's not so bad. So if you sleep with someone before you get married, just make sure that there is the same kind of dynamic, that you're not just letting your body take over, but that there's something higher within it, and you're not just hooking up. You get the same kind of idea with the Cain and Abel story. The Lord says to Cain, why are you so angry? Why is your countenance falling? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. And Cain and Abel, this symbolism of the will and the understanding. And what has to happen here? Oh, the will has to rule. Sorry, the understanding has to rule over the will. If the will does right, it'll be accepted. But what happens? Sin's lying at the door. It doesn't do right. The will destroys the understanding, at least it tries to, and so that it can do whatever it wants. So, but the idea is that the will, our intellectual side, has to rule over the body. That's That's what we're going for here tonight. And there's plenty of support for it. This is not, they use the phrase these days, settled science. Well, this is settled spirituality here, folks. Very clear. One of the unique teachings in the writings is that we have this connection with the spiritual world and that the spirits interact with us. And so this is early, 68 in the spiritual diary. Spirits were with me who did not know that I could speak with spirits. It pleased them that spirits rule the man and that they are the man. But it displeased them that man answers back. He explores their genius and that he rules them. So, when your body's craving things that it shouldn't, where is that coming from? It's coming from spiritual sources. And so we are supposed to use our brains to explore what it is that is being put upon us and say, no, I'm answering back. Yes, I have this desire to do X, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to follow that path. Because why? It's wisdom to restrain. So just a couple more here. Again, from the diary, which is unusual. That things rational, scientific, and natural ought to be altogether subservient to the things more interior. This fact is declared by one single instance, namely that the human body, with all its members, viscera, and organs, is so constructed, according to all the arts and sciences of nature, even the most hidden things of all the sciences, however many they are or can ever be, and all and each of them are entirely subservient to the soul and the will, so that they only know how to comply and serve. This is true of the body, and the body is such that it is to be esteemed as of no value, something that will die, thus as a corpse. What then are the sciences which are brought forth, for they are as nothing compared with the things of the body. So, if you want to not get vaccinated, here's your passage for it. This is it. Your body is got no value. It's going to die anyway. Why do I need to do this? Your science is garbage. It's nothing compared to the body. It's just like, it's the diary. So, take a grain of salt with it if you wish. I like the point that the body is nothing. We definitely don't get that sense in the news today. Somebody died. Oh no! It's just not the way it's supposed to be. So this is our last passage. It's spread over a few slides, but see what you get from it as a concluding piece. When a person is stripped of the body, he has a far more enlightened power of understanding than when he is living in the body. For the reason being that when he is in the body, worldly and bodily interests occupy his thoughts and bring obscurity there. But once he's been stripped of the body, those worldly and bodily interests do not get in the way. But through the removal of his mind from sensory experiences of external things, he is like those whose thought is more interior. All right, so this sounds good, right? You've got all sorts of, issues of following your body. You wipe on the next side and you're stripped of all of the body and the worldly interests. Okay, this sounds promising that all the people who you might consider sensory minded might have a chance of coming around. From this consideration, they could have known that in the state after death, a person is far more clear-sighted and enlightened than in the state before death, and that when a person dies, he passes from shade into that which, in comparison with it, is light, because he passes from the things which belong to the world to those which belong to heaven, and from those which belong to the body to those which belong to the spirit. But what is amazing, although people have the ability to understand these things, they still think the contrary. That is to say, they think it is in the state of life within the body that a person enjoys clear-sightedness, as compared with a state of life after being stripped of the body, which to them is a state of obscurity. So just kind of pause, because I think, it took me a while to kind of grapple with this, because it seems like he's saying people in the spiritual world see clearer. People in the natural world don't understand that people in the spiritual world see clearer. When you're in the spiritual world, you're gonna be stripped of all these body stuff, and you'll finally get it, even if you don't realize it now. And then we get this last bit. They're able to know, if only they use their reason, that the life which a person acquires to himself in the world follows him when he dies. That is, his life is the same after death. Were they able to know that nobody can cast aside the life which he has acquired to himself since earliest childhood, except by death itself, and that life cannot be transformed in a moment into another life, let alone into a contrary life. So I've been wrestling with this one as to how to take it. I mean, in one sense, it seems hopeful in the sense that, okay, once you're done with your body here and you move on to the next life, all the body stuff will be left behind. There's that. But there's this also the other side of it saying, well, you're going to be the same person after death. And so the loves that you have are still going to be there. And, how do you deal with this? And it kind of ties into the first talk this past Sunday where I was reading about the George Ritchie NDE. He sees, a woman wanting a cigarette, a guy at the office, telling his colleague what to do. And he sees all these people who are just so focused on the world, but they're still there. They're still in the world. And one of the things that I didn't read as part of that was Ritchie is saying to Jesus, he's like, well, why isn't it that people see you? Why don't they? You're right here. How come they don't clue in? And as he points out, well, because they're so focused on this, that they don't look up, they don't think higher. And so I don't know, for me, it's interesting to try to play with all this stuff and put it together. Is there, it's like there's like almost an escape velocity. You've got to get to a certain amount of spirituality to actually free yourself from this world and leave the body behind. But not everybody seems able or willing to do it. So
that's why George Ritchie can see it, because he's out of his body.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And he's
elevated level.
Yeah, and he's concerned with spiritual things. He has some concern beyond just the physical. So, I mean, I don't know what to make of all of what Ritchie says, because some of it seems to run contrary to the writings, where the writings talk about people raise up on the third day. And while Ritchie rose up fairly much instantly, and the writings don't describe people who die and still linger in this world. So there's some contrary stuff there. But it doesn't mean it's not true. I generally think the writings tell us things that we can't figure out on our own. And so that's why we don't have a physics book as part of the writings, because we can figure out physics, but we have to have revealed to us the things that we can't figure out. So maybe, ghost spirits who are still on this plane, hanging out here is something we can figure out. We don't need revealed truths to tell us that. I don't know. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, I suppose. But you've got all the passages, you've seen all this stuff, thoughts, comments, objections. This is your time.
Because in the spiritual world, you still have senses, and you still apparently have touch and sight and pleasures of eating food and still exist in the spiritual world, but presumably it's a different level. And if you're in heaven, then it's all what you're experiencing is based on what your spiritual life is at. So if you're in a good place, you've got beautiful surroundings. If you're in a state of obscurity, you don't have that same experience. It's more obvious to you that the senses are subservient to the spirit.
Yeah, but it wouldn't it also be kind of easy to fall in love with eye candy in heaven? And everything's amazing and beautiful, and you're just looking around and go, oh wow, look at that, you know. It's I guess you only get there when you realize that you shouldn't be doing that. Mhm. Well, there you have it. Any other comments? Yeah. Like I say, I'll throw up the recording on YouTube for anybody who wants to catch it later. Or John, if you want me to send you just the slides, I can send you the slides because I think you came in a few minutes late. You can read through all the different passages if you want. That's easy.
That'd be great if I could have the slides, Todd.
Yeah.
I think my last computer's gone. I had to log in with another one.
Oh dear.
And, to start the night, they'd suspended my Zoom account.
Oh.
I thought I was just logging in, but that didn't happen.
Yes, this is a new device.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can let me know where the recording is, I missed the first 15 minutes, so it
Okay.
might be nice to just go and.
All right.
You had an illustrated video on there by the sound of things. I didn't see that.
Okay. Yeah. No, I didn't have a video. I just talked about one. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's all right.
Happy to put the recording up on YouTube, and I'll send out the link in a couple of days. Well, thanks all for participating and showing up.
Thank you.
We'll hopefully, I was saying to Jen, in 2 weeks' time, we've got our near-death experience person going to join in and talk with us. So I'm hoping that actually happens. There's a part of me that's nervous that she will, for whatever reason, not show up, or technology be an issue. But yeah, fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens. So
That should be interesting.
yeah, she's got a really good story. So hope you can make that one.
Do it.
Sounds like
A little
very
practice
interesting.
session first with her. Make sure she's all ready to go.
Yeah, what's saying to Jen? I said I sent her an email saying, "Hey, would you like to do a practice?" But I haven't heard her respond back. So it's like, come on.
All right. Maybe it's just too far in the future for her.
What were you saying, Patricia?
Oh, I don't know. That was a few seconds ago. I don't remember now. Okay, can't remember.
All right.
Alrighty.
Very good. Well, good night. We'll see you all again.
Thank you very much, Todd.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
See you, John.
Bye.
Bye.